Somebody didn't want the gray state investigated, explored, and unveiled. That's why David Crowley is dead. He was the writer and director of one of the most controversial movies in modern history. What was so threatening about David Crowley? Many Hollywood films have depicted apocalyptic themes and end-of-the-world scenarios. Yet the directors of these films are still alive. Roland Emmerich wasn't murdered after directing blockbusters 2012 and A Day After Tomorrow. Steven Soderbergh wasn't killed after his movie, Contagion. But David Crowley is dead, along with his wife and child. They were killed before the production could be completed. What was so dangerous about Gray State? David Crowley claimed that his movie was based on real events. David claims that Hollywood has never dealt with topics like RFID, internment camps in America, and detention. When Hollywood does discuss internment and detention, it's almost always about World War II and the Holocaust. Literally thousands of films have been produced about the Holocaust, and yet one single film that addresses the potential for a Holocaust in the United States is stopped mid-production after its director is murdered. Seems a bit odd, doesn't it?
Well by some living in Crowley. Chris Walty spoke to the chief on his decision to sound the siren as a part of the city's curfew.
Crowley Police Chief Jimmy Broussard says he's never seen the purge, but he knows the sound to be an old military siren. Since the alert Thursday night, the department has received mixed messages about their curfew warning to residents. Ty Abshire was caught off guard when he heard the purge siren echoing through the streets of Crowley around 9 o'clock Thursday night.
It was just crazy. I knew they had the curfew, but nobody was expecting to hear that kind of siren.
Police Chief Jimmy Broussard says his intent was never to scare anyone.
As we examined it, we didn't want to go through with our regular sirens because we didn't want to create more havoc. And one of the officers who is military approached me and said, well, you know, Chief, there is an old military siren that was used. It was used in the movie Purge, but it's been used for many, many years. And after listening to it, I said, well, it's a more muffled tone. It, wouldn't create to me as much havoc.
March 26th, President Trump approves federal emergency aid for the state of Illinois. James Joseph, FEMA's Regional 5 administrator, moves into action. He says there's a federal plan for every disaster imaginable, including a deadly pandemic.
We're using the playbook, and we're actually writing some new policies along the way.
See this crap? Somebody knows I'm talking to you. Not according to the men in blue. Oh, what is it this time? Kiddie porn again? Sexual battery of a patient. They want to discredit you for what? Because I'm a dangerous man, because I know too much about the truth. Now that end of the world apocalyptic garbage you write? You know my work? I was right about Dallas, wasn't I? How were you right? Are you familiar with the hantavirus, Agent Mulder? Yeah, it was a deadly virus spread by field mice in the southwestern United States several years ago. According to the newspaper, FEMA was called out to manage an outbreak of the hantavirus. Are you familiar with what the Federal Emergency Management Agency's real power is? FEMA allows the White House to suspend constitutional government upon declaration of a national emergency. Think about that. What is an agency with such broad sweeping power doing managing a small viral outbreak in suburban Texas? You're saying it wasn't such a small outbreak? No. I'm saying it wasn't the hantavirus. Well, what was it? What was it? When we were young men in the military, your father and I were recruited for a project. They told us it was biological warfare or a virus. What killed those men? What killed them, I won't even write about. We have no context for what killed those men, or any appreciation of the scale at which it'll be unleashed in the future. A plague? The plague to end all plagues, Agent Mulder. A silent weapon for a quiet war. The systematic release of an indiscriminate organism for which the men who will bring it on still have no cure. They've been working on this for 50 years. While the rest of the world have been fighting groups and commies, these men have been secretly negotiating a plan planned Armageddon. Negotiating with whom? I think you know. The timetable has been set. It'll happen on a holiday when people are away from their homes. The president will declare a state of emergency, at which time all government, all federal agencies will come under the power of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, the secret government. They call me paranoid. Go back to Dallas, Agent Mueller, and dig. Or we're going to find out along with the rest of the country.
All US states have now been placed under a federal disaster declaration in a record first for the country. President Trump approved Wyoming as the final state to be placed under a disaster-affected country.
The war, celebrate
this government or anything else that's going on. They have been leading you down a path of lies, all to hide the truth. And here's what's really going on. FEMA has more power than the President of the United States or the Congress. It has the power to suspend laws, move entire populations, arrest and detain citizens without a warrant, and hold them without trial. It can seize property, food supplies, transportation systems, and can suspend the Constitution. When a state of emergency is declared, Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in the U.S. financial institution in any undefined national emergency. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the President, Congress cannot review this action for 6 months. Now, with the understanding that after Trump signed the National Emergency Declaration, FEMA took over. Now, this is March 13th, 2020. Listen to what he's going to say now. This is right after he signed the National Emergency into effect.
it is only the beginning of what we're really doing, and now we're in a different phase.
This is only the beginning of what we're really doing, because what they're really doing is putting everything in place to start the New World Order.
Now we're in a different phase.
The different phase that he's speaking of is that he is no longer president, and he has given full power over to FEMA when he signed the National Emergency Declaration.
We had some very old and obsolete rules.
Those old and obsolete rules are also known as the Constitution of the United States.
That we had to live with. It worked under certain circumstances, but not under mass circumstances. Under mass circumstances is being under FEMA rule. They were there for a long time. They were in place for a long time, and we're breaking them down now.
They're definitely breaking them down because the Constitution is suspended.
And they're very usable for certain instances, but not for this.
Because they can't go forward with their plan with the Constitution, our constitutional rights, still intact.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
So he is officially telling us in a coded message that we are now under the rule of FEMA, no longer having a president. Fast forward to March 19th, 2020, in the FEMA National Response Coordination Center.
Well, Mr. President, Vice President, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your visit to FEMA. I think your visit really, as you indicated last week, by signing the national emergency, has really empowered FEMA.
And he just made the declaration that FEMA is empowered, has really empowered FEMA.
Gray State investigated, explored, and unveiled. That's why David Crowley is dead.
So many questions, so much concern, and all of those people, I love, it was almost like on cue when you're talking about the army of volunteers, a flock of nuns walked right behind you.
Somebody didn't want the Gray State investigated, explored, and unveiled. That's why David Crowley is dead. He was the writer and director of one of the most controversial movies in modern history, and somebody didn't want him to produce it. What was so threatening about David Crowley and the Gray State concept? Like Gray State, many Hollywood films have depicted apocalyptic themes and end-of-the-world scenarios, yet the directors of these films are still alive. Roland Emmerich wasn't murdered after directing blockbusters 2012 and A Day After Tomorrow. Steven Soderbergh wasn't killed after his movie, Contagion. But David Crowley is dead, along with his wife and child. They were killed before the production could be completed. What was so dangerous about Gray State? David Crowley claimed that his movie was based on real events, not Hollywood propaganda like you see in movies such as 2012.
California is going down!
God, you sound like a crazy person. The governor just said we're fine now.
The guy's an actor, he's reading a script!
So the Gray State is essentially an artistic representation of real aspects put into a fictional format. Once you open your eyes and start looking at all these trends like RFID, like martial law, like FEMA, like executive orders, you have to act within your own capacity to sort of, talk about this. A lot of people filter that into the political realm. A lot of people do other things like grassroots style. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, Danny's an actor. So we put our heads together and we started making a project that would act within our own faculty to portray that in a creative manner. So there's a story here. I have to start telling a story. So I was looking for the next film project to work on anyway. I'm like, well, this would be perfect. And it's not really perfect because you have to kind of filter down all this stuff into a narrative storyline that's not just propaganda telling you what's going to happen next, like 2012 or A Day After Tomorrow. It's got to be a human story, and it's got to be enduring and compelling. The way we're different is we're independent, and we don't expect any participation from any studios just because of its contentious nature. I mean, anyone knows that Hollywood has not approached this topic so directly before. That's what makes Gray State so compelling. It's that different. Definitely the trailer is our best efforts to kind of show this world and expose these very real issues that exist in our world today.
David claims that Hollywood has never dealt with topics like RFID, internment camps in America, and detention. Instead, they have produced propaganda in place of real issues. When Hollywood does discuss internment and detention, it's almost always about World War II and the Holocaust. Literally thousands of films have been produced about the Holocaust, and yet one single film that addresses the potential for a Holocaust in the United States is stopped mid-production after its director is murdered. Seems a bit odd, doesn't it? They don't want Americans, Canadians, and other Western countries to know what is coming. And that is a plan to intentionally collapse Western society. If you don't believe me, read the plan that's been in the books for over a century. Planned out by the Illuminati and penned by Albert Pike back in the 1800s in his 3 World War predictions. Gray State was simply too threatening. It revealed too much, not just the obvious points of what could happen with the collapse of a society, things like martial law, food shortages, and a provisional government. It goes beyond this. David knew a secret, and he left it inside of the trailer for Gray State, in plain sight. David Crowley used the Illuminati's favorite game against the notorious Cabal. It's a game they've played with the human race for years. They provide clues about the future to toy with us. They did it with 9/11. They've done it with other major catastrophes. It's called predictive programming. On occasion, though, they get outsmarted at their own game. What was David's hidden message inside the Gray State? And could it be the reason for his death? Perhaps the scariest part of Gray State's conceptual trailer is this character here, who appears to be operating a guillotine. David Crowley was very intentional in this frame of the movie. He added something that I believe he wanted the people to know about. Who is the identity of this executioner? If you look closely, you will see that this terrifying character is wearing something around his waist. It appears to look like an apron. The executioner wears a Freemason apron, complete with the all-seeing eye, the compass, and the 2 pillars. I do believe David Crowley is trying to tell us something.
Nigeria in 1912, Aleister Crowley would write one of his most popular books, The Book of Lies. Once The Book of Lies was out, Aleister would be accused of sharing some of the OTOs practiced by the OTO today. He would also publish another one of his famous works, A Hymn to Pan. Now, after having nearly full control of the OTO, Aleister would return to Paris, where him and Victor Neuberg would work for 7 weeks straight on 24 new rituals. During that time, Aleister's rituals would become more sadistic, and Neuberg would finally distance himself from Aleister, building up the courage to leave Aleister even though he put a curse on him. During the start of World War I, Aleister would inquire the British government to allow him to work as a spy. He would be denied, and so he would move to America. Aleister would find a job writing for Vanity Fair. He would also find a job writing for a German publication called The Fatherland, writing German propaganda under the name Baphomet. This would eventually earn him the title of traitor by the British government. After leaving America, Aleister would move with his new Scarlet Woman, Leah Hersing, to Cefalù, Italy. There, they would start their temple dedicated to Thelema, called the Abbey of Thelema. They would also bring along a nanny named Nanette. Every morning they would start their day in their magical robes, giving prayers to the sun in the east, consecrating their magical weapons, and in the evenings they would finish up the day with sex magic. Both Leah and Nanette would become pregnant with Aleister's children. Leah would lose one of their children to a sickness, and she would miscarry another. Nanette, being extremely jealous of Leah, and would have her and Aleister's son away from the Abbey. The Abbey would take on many followers over the years, including silent film actress Jane Wolfe. In the Abbey, members of Thelema will be subject to filth and disease, filled with drug-crazed orgies and sex magic, where the children were also allowed to watch. Aleister couldn't kick his heroin addiction and ended up writing the book Diary of a Drug Fiend to fund the Abbey of Thelema. There was also a ritual there where they would give members high doses of drugs and lock them in a room with paintings all over the walls. Members were also encouraged to cut themselves every time they used the word I. There was even a man that lost his life there named Raoul Loveday. It was suspected that he drank from a dirty well. There was also a story of him drinking cat's blood in a magic ritual, and this made him even more sick. There was also many stories of bestiality and human sacrifice that went on in the Abbey. Once Loveday died and his wife, Betty May, made it back to England, she began immediately to tell newspapers what was going on in Cefalù. A publication called John Bull was the most critical of Aleister. It was around this time that Aleister would earn the name the wickedest man in the world, and multiple articles would be published about him up until the moment that Benito Mussolini would deport him from Italy. After being kicked out of Italy, Aleister would go through phases of multiple lovers and continued sex magic, off and on drug addictions, and everywhere he went, his reputation would precede him. During this time, he would write another one of his famous works, Magic in Theory and Practice. He would even have one more child that he would raise like a loving father. Although surrounded by some friends and family that did not desert him, Aleister still remained hopelessly addicted to drugs until the day of his death. He would pass away at the age of 72.
It's in control of anything anymore. He just looks like he has just lost his best friend in all of these videos that we're seeing now ever since he signed the National Emergency Declaration. I'm sure most of us thought that FEMA was created to help people in disasters. But here's the truth about FEMA. FEMA was created in a series of executive orders. A presidential executive order, whether constitutional or not, becomes law simply by its publication in the Federal Registry. Congress is bypassed. Executive Order 12148 created the Federal Emergency Management Agency that is to interface with the Department of Defense for civil defense planning and funding. An emergency czar was appointed. Executive Order 12656 appointed the National Security Council as the principal body that should consider emergency powers. This allows the government to increase domestic intelligence and surveillance of U.S. citizens and would restrict the freedom of movement within the United States and grant the government the right to isolate large groups of civilians. That's where we're at right now, people. We are all being told what to do, where we can and can't go. The National Guard could be federalized to seal all borders and take control of U.S. airspace and all ports of entry. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of highways and seaports. Executive Order 10995 allows the government to seize and control the communications media. Executive Order 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10998 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. That's where your census comes in. Executive Order 11003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. Executive Order 11004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. Executive Order 11005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. Executive Order 11051 specifies the responsibility of the Office of Emergency Planning and gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of increased international tensions and economic or financial crisis. Executive Order 11310 grants authority to the Department of Justice to enforce the plans set out in executive orders, to institute industrial support, to establish judicial and legislative liaison, to control all aliens, to operate penal and correctional institutions. And Executive Order 11049 assigns emergency preparedness function to federal departments and agencies, consolidating 21 operative executive orders issued over a 15-year period.
I had been to Puyallup a few.
Real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Hopefully this has opened some of your eyes so that you can see where we're at in this timeline. This is true. This is what's going on. These are facts. Y'all have a blessed day.
Oh, shut up, silly woman, said the reptile with a grin. You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in.
I'm the hand of Mona Lisa's skirt. I'm a surprise, Kevin. They don't see me coming. That's what you're missing.
Then his other hand went up inside my skirt.
Somebody I want you to meet. Kevin and Marianne Lomax. This is Senator Alphonse D'Amato. Ambassador Charles Gagano. In case you didn't know, these are the Republicans of New York.
You know, Barjoon always overstates things.
Donald Trump was supposed to be here tonight, but he had a business emergency. Probably Mark Zuckerman.
In case you didn't know, these are the Republicans of New York.
You know, Barjoon always overstates things.
Donald Trump was supposed to be here tonight, but he had a business emergency. Probably Mark Zuckerman.
Mr. Marto?
Every enemy of the state!
Gray State is less a movie than it is a warning. We do not live in a dictatorship, but we do live in a police state. What we're going to see is the unveiling of this gray state foisted upon America. Americans believe that they can't do anything. And day by day, they're becoming correct.
Last year, this case has become the subject of much speculation and plenty of theories on the internet, most of it completely wrong. The reality is the truth of what happened to David Crowley and his family is stranger and sadder than anyone imagined.
About Gray State. David Crowley claimed that his movie was based on real events.
In 2012, a man named David Crowley was working on a movie that depicted a very dystopian world. However, the movie was never released because in 2015, he mysteriously took his entire family's life and then his own. But people, including some close to David, believe that it was foul play involved because he was trying to say too much through his movie. I got the trailer, watch it and let me know what you think.
Gray State is less a movie than it is a warning.
In 2012, a man named...
Somebody didn't want the Gray State investigated, explored, and unveiled. That's why David Crowley is dead. He was the writer and director of one of the most controversial movies in modern history. And somebody didn't want him to produce it. What was so threatening about David Crowley and the Gray State concept? Like Gray State, many Hollywood films have depicted apocalyptic themes and end-of-the-world scenarios. Yet the director
TikTok. So this movie, or should I call it a conceptual movie, because it was never finished, it was never released. This was being made by a man called David Crowley, who unfortunately is now unalived and did not get the chance to finish this movie. However, I beg everybody, please watch what he was trying to make.
What is Gray State?
Gray State is less a movie than it is a warning. We do not live in a dictatorship, but we do live in a police state. What we're going to see is the unveiling of this gray state. We're losing.
something about it that just kind of gets on you and you just can't wash it off.
Credibility means nothing to me. What I care about is truth.
God, I don't think you're missing anything. The only thing you're missing is why.
It's a very dangerous subject to talk about.
Last night I dreamt about how things were. And then I woke up here.
In every part of the universe, it is the same. Hatred, fear, and unreasoning hostility have possessed men's hearts. But I will have no part of it.
What is Grayscape?